The champagne glasses were cold in her hands. Nia Vance stood in the corridor outside Kang Min's study, barefoot on heated marble, wearing the silk robe he'd given her 2 Christmases ago, deep burgundy, embroidered at the cuffs. She'd poured the champagne 10 minutes ago. The bubbles were going flat. She'd been about to knock. The door was open 2 inches. Not enough to see him. Enough to hear everything. Transfer the Jeju holdings to the Cayman entity first. That creates the jurisdictional gap, Kang Min's voice. The same voice he used at 6 a.m. conference calls. The same voice he used to order coffee, measured, bloodless. Once that clears, the domestic restructuring can proceed without her signature. A second voice, his lawyer, Shin Byung-ho, on speaker. And the timeline? Before she can contest. That's the only timeline that matters. Nia set the champagne glasses down on the hallway console. Both of them. No sound. Her hands didn't shake, not yet. She straightened up, turned, and walked back toward the bedroom, with the same unhurried stride she used when leaving a deposition. In the master bathroom, she turned the shower on, all the way hot. She sat down on the tile floor with her back against the glass door and let the steam build around her. The robe darkened at the hem where water pooled. Her hands started shaking at the 3-minute mark. She watched them, pressed her palms flat against the cold tile, counted the seconds until the trembling stopped 40, 41, 42, and when it did, she got up, walked to the vanity, and opened her laptop. Kang Min had given her administrative access to the Vance Yoon Syndicate's subsidiary accounts 3 years ago, at their wedding reception. He'd slid the encrypted access card across the table between their dessert plates, said it was the most intimate thing he knew how to give. She'd understood what he meant. She hadn't been wrong to believe him. She pulled up the offshore ledger index. Her eyes moved before her hands did, scanning the column headers, the entity names, the account structures. She wasn't looking for the divorce documentation. She already knew where that would lead. She was looking for the load-bearing walls, the architecture underneath everything else. The files, loaded in layers, Seoul real estate holdings, Tokyo development accounts, a Singapore trust she'd reviewed twice before and signed off on. She moved through them fast, pulling subfolders, cross-referencing disbursement records against the property filings. The shower was still running, steam pressed against the mirror above her. Then she found the Cayman shell. Not the one Shin had mentioned on the call, a different one, older. The entity name was registered as VY Meridian Holdings, incorporated 8 years ago, 14 months before she and Kang Min met. She pulled the transaction history. Clean. Every entry justified. Every number balanced against a corresponding outflow in the Seoul accounts. She went back 5 years. 7. 8. Every column, every quarter, every reconciliation, immaculate. Nia sat back. In 15 years of forensic accounting, she had audited 31 companies, testified in 9 federal cases, and flagged discrepancies in accounts that 3 separate Big Four firms had cleared. She knew what genuine financial health looked like. She also knew what it looked like when someone had spent years learning to imitate it. Books this clean meant one thing. Someone had been very, very careful for a very, very long time. She opened a second window and pulled the Seoul real estate records, not the syndicate's filings, but the public registry, cross-referenced against the subsidiary accounts. Found the first discrepancy at 1:14 a.m. A property in Mapo-gu listed under a holding company that appeared nowhere in the VY Meridian structure but shared a registered agent with 2 of the Cayman Shell's sub-entities. She flagged it, kept moving. By 2 a.m. she had 11 flags across 4 jurisdictions. By 3 a.m. she had 19, and a secondary pattern emerging in the Tokyo account's disbursements timed to land 3 days after each Seoul real estate transaction. Small enough individually to fall below automatic audit triggers, large enough collectively to represent a staggering and deliberate rerouting of funds. Her robe had dried. The shower had long gone cold and she'd turned it off without noticing. The bathroom was bright and silent. Outside, Seoul moved at its nighttime register, distant, indifferent, enormous. She was building a map, not a case, not yet. She needed the destination before she could trace the route. She was deep in a 2019 disbursement cluster when her screen lit up with a calendar notification. Kangmin's schedule automatically synced to hers when they'd merged their accounts 2 years ago. She'd never turned it off. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Vance Yoon Emergency Board Session. She clicked it open. The agenda field had one line: Spousal Asset Reclassification Internal Review. The meeting had been created 6 weeks ago. Naya looked at the timestamp for a long time. 6 weeks ago, she had been in Busan for a client audit. She'd called Kang Min every night from the hotel. He'd asked about her cases, told her about a board dinner, asked what she wanted for her birthday. She closed the laptop, stood up, walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at her had flawless posture and a very still face. Dark eyes that were doing the particular kind of math that didn't need a calculator. She picked up her phone from the vanity counter and scrolled to a contact labeled Psy Legal. Park Soo-yeon answered on the second ring. She didn't ask why Naya was calling at 3 a.m. She didn't ask what happened. She said, "I'll make coffee. Come now," and hung up. Naya set the phone down, looked at herself in the mirror one more time. Then she went to get dressed, not in the silk robe, not in anything soft. She pulled out the charcoal blazer she wore to depositions, the one with the structured shoulders, and she buttoned it to the top. She did not take her wedding ring off. Not because she'd forgotten it, because she wasn't finished with it yet. She picked up her laptop, her access card, and her phone, walked through the bedroom without looking at the bed. Down the corridor, past the hallway console, past the 2 untouched glasses of champagne, still sitting exactly where she'd left them. She did not look at those either. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. As they closed, her phone buzzed once in her hand. A text from an unknown number, no area code, sent at 3:19 a.m. "Be careful who you call at night, Mrs. Vance. Some people are already watching." If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they knew exactly what you'd do next, you already know what Naya is feeling right now. Stay with her. Because what she does in the next 24 hours will change everything. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single move. Naya was back in the penthouse by 7. She'd slept 40 minutes on Park Soo-yeon's office couch while her attorney drafted the first round of paperwork, and she looked exactly as rested as that suggested, which is to say, she looked fine. Blazer pressed, hair pinned, wedding ring on her left hand where it had always been. She made herself coffee in the kitchen, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, and watched morning arrive over the Han River in long, pale strips. She was on her second cup when the elevator opened. Madame Yoon didn't knock. She never knocked. Not in this penthouse, not in any room she'd decided belonged to her by inheritance or instinct. She was 63 and small, barely reaching Naya's shoulder, dressed in dove gray with her silver hair set in a precise chignon. She moved through the entryway and past the living room without looking at any of it, and she dismissed the housekeeper, Mrs. O, with 2 fingers raised toward the door. Mrs. O left. The elevator closed. Madame Yoon sat down at the head of the dining table, not across from Naya at the head. She set her handbag beside her chair and folded her hands on the table and looked at Naya the way a customs officer looks at a passport, checking for forgeries. Naya pulled out the chair directly across from her and sat. Morning light came through the windows at a low angle, cutting across the table between them. Madame Yoon began speaking in formal Korean, not the conversational register, the high formal, the one used in courts and boardrooms and old family addresses. Her voice was unhurried, almost pleasant. Naya's Korean was fluent. Madame Yoon did not know that. What Madame Yoon said translated precisely. "This family has tolerated your presence out of respect for my son's temporary poor judgment. That period is ending. You have been an adequate wife in the ways that matter least, and a consistent liability in the ways that matter most. What I am about to offer you is more than you are owed, and more than you have earned. You will take it, and you will be grateful, and you will not contact anyone in this family again." She reached into her handbag, placed a check on the table, and slid it across with 2 fingers, the way you'd slide a napkin to someone who'd spilled. $10 million, already signed. Madame Yoon's signature at the bottom, in the same precise script Naya had seen on syndicate documents. Madame Yoon switched to English, just long enough to say, "You were never meant to last, dear." Naya looked at the check. She picked it up with both hands and read every line of it. The account number, the issuing bank, the memo field, which had been left blank. She took her time. Madame Yoon let her, which was its own kind of statement. Then Naya folded the check once, lengthwise, pressed the crease flat with her thumbnail, and tucked it into the breast pocket of her blazer. She smiled, not warmly. "Thank you. I've been looking for seed capital." The muscle at the corner of Madame Yoon's jaw tightened a small contraction, fast, gone in under a second. Her hands stayed folded. "You should think carefully about—" "I have," Naya said. She was already standing. "I've been thinking carefully since 3 o'clock this morning. You should finish your tea, Madame Yoon. Traffic getting out of Hanamdong is terrible after 9. There was no tea on the table. Naya walked to the kitchen. She heard the chair push back, heard the elevator open and close. She stood at the counter and breathed through her nose 4 counts in, 4 counts out, until the tightness across her sternum eased. Then she picked up her phone and called Park Soo-yeon. "The check cleared?" Soo-yeon asked. "It will. I need you to move 2 million to the Hangul Futures Foundation account before noon. Draft the press release, naming Madame Yoon as the donor. Use her full formal name, Yoon Chae-won. Make sure the foundation director is available for quotes." Naya was already pulling up her contacts with her other hand. "The remaining 8. I need a list of the syndicate's suppressed creditors. The ones the Yoon family has been sitting on. I have 3 names already. Start there." She hung up. Called the first creditor before the elevator downstairs had reached the lobby. By 10 a.m., the press release was live. By 11, 2 journalists had called Madame Yoon's personal publicist for comment on her generous contribution to children's literacy across Korea. By noon, the foundation director had posted a photograph of the transfer confirmation on the organization's official channels, with Madame Yoon's name in the caption in large, grateful text. Naya was on her 4th call when Kang Min walked through the apartment. He'd come from the direction of the study. His jacket was off, collar open, and he had the look of someone who'd been on calls of his own since early morning, the tight set of his shoulders, the slight forward lean in his posture. He saw Naya at the dining table, phone to her ear, 3 legal documents spread in front of her. He crossed to the window, looked down at the street below where his mother's car had been parked an hour ago and was no longer. His chest expanded once on a slow inhale. His hands, at his sides, closed and opened. He turned toward Naya and opened his mouth. She held up one finger without looking at him, kept talking. He stood there for 4 seconds. Then he walked back toward the study and closed the door behind him. Naya watched the door, kept her voice level on the call, finished the conversation, hung up, and sat with the quiet of the apartment pressing in around her. Her phone rang at 6:47 p.m. A number she didn't recognize, a soul exchange, not a contact. She answered. The man on the line identified himself as the director of accounts at Shinhan Asset Partners, one of the 3 creditors she'd purchased debt from that morning. His voice had the careful neutrality of someone delivering news he wasn't sure how to categorize. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "I'm calling because I think you should know what you actually bought today." Naya picked up her pen. "Tell me. The debt you acquired the Yoon family suppressed it because it's collateralized, not against domestic property, against an offshore entity. Vi Meridian Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands." He paused. "I'm told that account doesn't appear on any of the syndicate's official filings." Naya's pen stopped moving. VY Meridian, the immaculate shell she'd flagged at 1:14 a.m. The one with 19 discrepancy markers spread across 4 jurisdictions. The one she'd been building a map around for the last 16 hours. "Who set up the collateral arrangement?" she asked. The man on the line took a breath. "The signatory on the collateral agreement is Yoon Chae-won." "Madame Yoon." "Thank you," Naya said. "Send me the original documents tonight." She set the phone down, looked at the dining table at the press release draft, the creditor files, the legal pad covered in her own handwriting. Then she looked at the closed door of Kang Min's study. The check Madame Yoon had handed her this morning was supposed to make her disappear. Instead, it had just handed her the single thread that, when pulled, would unravel everything. Her phone buzzed against the table. A calendar reminder automatic from Kang Min's synced schedule. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Vance, Yoon, emergency board session. 12 hours away. Naya pulled the collateral documents up on her laptop and got back to work. She hadn't slept. At 6 a.m., the kitchen was blue-gray, the city outside still catching its first light, and Naya was already at the counter in her full blazer with 3 legal documents arranged in front of her and a coffee going cold at her elbow. Her forensic report, 41 pages, annotated, cross-referenced, devastating, sat in a manila folder to her right. The court order application was open on her laptop. Park Soo-yeon was on video call in the bottom corner of the screen, her own office lit by the harsh overhead fluorescence of someone who'd also not slept, going through the final filing language in a low, precise voice. The collateral documentation from Shinhan confirms the VY Meridian link, Soo-yeon said. That ties Madame Yoon directly to the siphoning. The judge will sign. When does the courthouse open? 7:45. We file at 7:46. Soo-yeon looked up from her papers. Naya, once this goes through, there's no version of today that's quiet. I know. Kang Min. I know, Naya said again. Flat. Final. Soo-yeon held her gaze for a moment, then looked back down at the documents. They worked through the remaining language in the application. Naya caught 2 inconsistencies in the asset schedule and corrected them without being asked. By 7:15, they had a clean filing package. By 7:30, Naya had closed the laptop, washed her coffee cup, and was standing at the window watching the Han River go gold in the early light. Behind her, she heard Kang Min's bedroom door open. His footsteps in the corridor steady, unhurried. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in a dark suit, already dressed for the board meeting, and stopped when he saw her. They looked at each other across the kitchen. He said, "You're up early." "I never went to sleep," she said. His eyes dropped to the documents on the counter. Came back up to her face. He opened his mouth, closed it, and walked to the coffee machine instead and started a fresh cup. Naya turned back to the window. Neither of them said anything else. At 7:46 a.m., Soo-yeon filed. At 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the board meeting was scheduled to begin, the court order cleared. Naya's phone showed the confirmation at 8 hours 47 minutes and 23 seconds. She was sitting in the penthouse library by then, the forensic report open on the low table in front of her, morning light cutting hard and white across the floor through the floor-to-ceiling glass. She read the confirmation twice, set the phone face down on the table, pressed both hands flat on her knees, and exhaled through her nose. 42 domestic accounts, every Korean holding in the Vance Yoon Syndicate's operational structure, frozen by court order, effective immediately. Kang Min's chief of staff called at 8:49, then again at 8:51, then twice more before 8:53. Naya watched the screen light up each time and did not answer. At 9:04, the library door opened. Kang Min came in fast and pulled the door shut behind him. The room was bright, too bright for what was on his face, which was controlled in the way that takes real effort to maintain. He crossed to the bookshelf on the far wall and put both hands flat against the shelving and stood there with his back to her for 3 full seconds. When he turned around, his knuckles were white. "You froze the operating capital for 1,800 employees." Not a question, not yet yelling. The voice he used when he was deciding whether to yell. "I froze your capital," Naya said. "The employees will be fine once the court-appointed auditor reviews the embezzlement record I filed alongside the freeze order." His chin lifted. The embezzlement. He stopped. His gaze went to the forensic report on the table, the manila folder, the annotated tabs visible along the edge. The rapid recalculation moved through his eyes where they landed, how fast they moved, the slight tightening at the outer corners when he understood the scope of what he was looking at. "How long have you been building that?" "Long enough." "Naya." His voice dropped. The control in it cracked not into anger, into something she hadn't heard from him before. I need you to listen to me. What you heard in my study the other night, that call with Shin. He pushed off the bookshelf and crossed the room in 4 steps, stopping at the edge of the table. Close. His jaw was tight, and his eyes were on hers, and he was, she realized, frightened. That wasn't about divorcing you. She kept her hands on her knees, kept her face even. The agenda said spousal asset reclassification. That was a cover description. Shin's idea, he said. If my mother's people got access to the calendar, they needed to see something routine. He exhaled hard through his nose. My mother hired someone, Naya, 2 weeks ago. I found out 10 days ago, and my legal team has been building a protocol to erase your identity, move you out of the country, new documentation, new accounts, new everything, before. He stopped. His gaze went to the window. The muscle in his throat moved. Before what? She said. He looked back at her. Before her people found you. The library was very bright and very quiet. Outside, 40 stories down, Seoul continued at full volume traffic, construction, the city's permanent forward motion. In the library, neither of them moved. Naya's phone buzzed on the table between them. She looked down at it. Unknown number, no text, just an image file. She opened it. The photograph was taken from outside, through glass. It showed the penthouse kitchen in the dark last night, sometime after midnight, judging by the city lights behind the frame. It showed Naya at the counter, laptop open, alone. Whoever took it had been standing outside the window. 40 stories up. She turned the phone around so Kang Min could see the screen. The color left his face, not gradually, all at once, the way a light goes off. How many people did your mother hire? Naya asked. He was already pulling out his own phone. Get away from the windows, he said. Right now. They moved to the interior room. No windows. A study off the main corridor that Kang Min used for secure calls, concrete walls behind the paneling. A signal blocker built into the ceiling that he'd installed 2 years ago without telling her why. Naya had always assumed it was syndicate habit. Now she understood it was architecture built for exactly this. Kang Min locked the door, pulled up a file on his tablet, and set it on the desk between them without preamble. 3 names, photographs beside each one surveillance quality, taken in public spaces. The first man was broad-shouldered, mid-40s, photographed outside the Shinhan building the same morning Naya had purchased the syndicate's suppressed debts. The second was caught on a hotel lobby camera 2 blocks from Park Soo-yeon's office. The third photograph stopped Naya's eyes completely. She recognized the background, the floral arrangements, the foundation banner along the back wall. He was at the literacy gala, she said. Yesterday afternoon. My security flagged him 4 hours after your press release went live. Kang Min's voice was even, but he was standing with his weight forward, both hands braced on the desk. They weren't watching you before that. You made your first move, and they activated within the same news cycle. Naya looked at the 3 photographs, looked at the timestamp on the third one. A slow compression built across her sternum, and she breathed against it deliberately. 4 counts in, 4 counts out, until it eased. Your escape protocol. The burner accounts, the relocation funds, all of that was built into the domestic account structure? Kang Min's jaw tightened. Yes. So when I froze the 42 accounts, you locked every exit I'd built. He straightened up, pushed a hand through his hair once, fast, and dropped it. Safe house leases, emergency documentation, the offshore relay accounts my team was going to use to move you, all of it is sitting behind the court order right now. Naya absorbed that. She pulled out the chair in front of the desk and sat. How long before your mother's people make a direct move? I don't know. That's the problem. He sat across from her. I know who she hired. I don't know their timeline, and I can't access the funds to accelerate ours. Naya looked at the whiteboard on the wall behind him, blank, a marker on the tray below it. She stood up, picked up the marker, and uncapped it. Then we work with what we have, she said. Talk. What followed was not a reconciliation. There was no moment where either of them acknowledged the 3 days of operating in separate silences, or the fact that they'd each been running parallel survival strategies without telling the other. There wasn't time for it, and neither of them reached for it. What there was instead was the whiteboard, and two people who were very good at what they did finally doing it in the same room. Naya mapped the financial architecture on the left side, the VY Meridian shell at the top. Below it, 11 years of disbursement lines flowing into a proxy company she'd identified at 4 a.m., registered under the name Yoon Capital, which was Yoon Chae-won's family name rendered in formal order. Madame Yoon had been siphoning from the syndicate's operating accounts for over a decade and routing everything through an entity that existed, on paper, as a mid-sized sole investment firm with no public profile and no active employees. The board knew about the rerouting, Naya said, drawing the connection lines. I can see it in the approval signatures on the disbursement records. At least 9 of them signed off on transfers that fed into Yoon Capital. But the scale. She tapped the figure she'd written at the top of the column. They didn't know the full number. Nobody knew the full number except Madame Yoon and whoever processed the Cayman end. Kang-min stared at the figure. The muscle under his left eye contracted once. She took that much. Over 11 years, yes. Naya recapped the marker. When the board sees the complete forensic report, the ones who are genuinely exposed will have 2 options: go down with her, or cooperate with the audit and take a reduced position. Most of them will cooperate. People with that much to lose are practical. Kang-min was already writing on the right side of the board. Physical vulnerabilities entry points to the building, the security rotation schedule, the 2 staff members he trusted without reservation. He pulled out his phone and sent 2 texts in quick succession, his lieutenants. Naya watched him work and didn't interrupt. Chairman O, he said, still writing. He's been on the founding board since my grandfather's time. He's watched my mother consolidate power for 20 years, and he has hated every move she's made. If he stands up at the assembly, half the room follows him before I say a word. Can you reach him without your mother knowing? I'm about to find out. He finished the texts and set the phone down, looked at the whiteboard at her side and his side, and the place in the center where their writing had begun to overlap, the financial lines crossing into the security grid without either of them planning it that way. He looked at it for a moment longer than necessary. Naya turned back to her laptop and opened the syndicate's archive index. She was searching for the original incorporation documents pre-Yoon influence, pre-restructuring, the founding framework that predated everything Madame Yoon had spent 2 decades rewriting. She found the file at the bottom of a 2003 subfolder, scanned, and never digitally indexed. She opened it. She read the succession clause twice. Then she unplugged the tablet from the desk dock, opened the scanned document on its screen, and held it out to Kang-min without saying anything. He took it, read it. His eyes moved through the succession clause not by bloodline, not by seniority, but by demonstrated operational control of the syndicate's core financial and executive functions. He looked up at her. Neither of them spoke. The document sat between them and said everything that needed saying, and they both left it there. Kang-min's phone lit up on the desk. A call from his lieutenant, the one he'd sent to collect Chairman O. He answered. Listened for 11 seconds. The line of his shoulders went rigid from the base of his neck down. Say that again, he said. His lieutenant's voice came through tight and fast. Madame Yoon had arrived at Chairman O's Seongbuk-dong residence 40 minutes ago. She was still inside. She'd brought 2 members of the syndicate's legal counsel with her and had dismissed the chairman's personal staff from the ground floor. Kang-min ended the call, set the phone down with deliberate care. She's already there, Naya said. Not a question. 40 minutes ago. His voice was quiet, which means she knew we'd go to him. He looked at Naya across the desk. She has someone inside. Someone close enough to know our next move before we make it. Naya's eyes went to the whiteboard, to the 2 text messages Kang-min had sent 11 minutes ago, to the 2 names he'd written on the right side under trusted. She didn't say it. She didn't need to. Kang-min was already looking at the same thing. The private floor of the Lade World Tower had no nameplate, no directory listing, No elevator button a visitor could press without a keycard. The room itself was long and windowless on 3 sides, lit by recessed panels that kept everything in the same flat, neutral light, regardless of the time of day. 55 chairs around an oval table. Water glasses already filled. The kind of room built for decisions that would never appear in any public record. Madame Yoon was already seated at the head of the table when Kang Min and Naya walked in. She had chosen her position early arrived before anyone else, Naya suspected, to establish the geography of the room before the room could establish itself around her. She sat with her hands folded on the table, and her attorney, a thin man named Woo Jae-hyun, positioned to her left with a counterfiling stacked in front of him 2 inches thick. She did not look up when the door opened. Kang Min and Naya took seats on the same side of the table. Not at the head, not opposite Madame Yoon, side by side, 2/3 of the way down, with clear sightlines to every other chair in the room. The board members filing in after them registered it. The glances were brief but sequential, moving from Kang Min to Naya to the space between them and back again. In 3 years of attending syndicate functions, Naya had always been positioned separately. Adjacent, decorative, peripheral. The room noticed the change and said nothing. By the time all 55 seats were filled, the air in the room had the dense, pressurized quality of a space where too many people were working too hard to appear unbothered. Woo Jae-hyun shuffled his counterfiling. 2 board members on Madame Yoon's side of the table exchanged a look across their water glasses. Naya opened the document bag at her feet and began distributing pages. She didn't stand, didn't call for attention. She simply placed a single printed sheet face down in front of each board member, working her way around the table with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had done this in courtrooms and depositions for 15 years. 1 page per person. When she reached Madame Yoon's end of the table, she set the last 2 sheets down in front of the remaining members and returned to her seat. "You can turn them over," she said. The pages went over in a ripple around the table. The room read. Naya watched faces. The condensed forensic summary was 1 page, because she had written it to be 1 page, 41 pages of documentation compressed into a single document that took 90 seconds to read and left no interpretive room whatsoever. 11 years of siphoning. The Yoon Capital Proxy. The VY Meridian Collateral Chain. Every board member's name appeared exactly once, flagged, either as a signatory on affected disbursements or explicitly cleared. The complicit ones knew immediately which category they were in. So did the clean ones. Naya gave them 90 seconds. At the 80-second mark, a board member on the far left, Director Lim, who had 3 signatures on the disbursement approvals and knew it, pushed his chair back and stood. He moved to the opposite side of the table without looking at Madame Yoon. 3 seconds later, 4 more stood. Then 3 more after that, 7 board members remaining on Madame Yoon's side. The numbers in the room had permanently redistributed. Woo Jae-hyun started talking. His voice was loud and procedurally precise injunctions, counterfilings, the freeze order's jurisdictional overreach. He was good. He was building towards something. Park Soo-yeon cut across him with a single procedural objection, cited by statute number and subclause, that required him to stop, locate the relevant code, verify her citation, and formally respond before continuing. She delivered it in the flat, unhurried tone of someone reading a grocery list. It took him 2 minutes and 14 seconds to respond. The doors at the far end of the room opened at the 2-minute mark. Chairman Oh was 81 years old and walked with a carved wooden cane that he used more as punctuation than support. He had slipped out of his Seongbuk-dong residence through the kitchen entrance 40 minutes before Madame Yoon's legal team realized he was gone. He came into the boardroom with a notarized document folder under his arm and took the empty chair at the foot of the table directly opposite Madame Yoon without being invited. He opened the folder, slid the founding charter to the center of the table, the original, authenticated, notarized, with the succession clause visible and tabbed. The vote that followed was procedural. It took 4 minutes. Under the founding charter's succession clause, 11 years of unauthorized siphoning of syndicate operational funds constituted a voluntary forfeiture of directorial standing. The tally was not close. Madame Yoon sat through the count without moving. When the final number was confirmed, she stood. Her attorney reached for her arm not to guide her, to hold her. Her eyes went across the table to Naya, and what was in them was not rage. It was the cold, focused attention of someone filing information away for future use. She was recalibrating, deciding what came next. She left without speaking. The door closed behind her. Chairman O looked down the table at Naya. He dipped his chin once, not a bow, not a nod, an acknowledgement, from one precise person to another. Then he gathered his folder and followed the room out. The gala that evening occupied the top 2 floors of a building in Gangnam with no signage on the exterior and a guest list that did not exist in any digital system. Phones went into sealed pouches at the door. The lighting was low and amber, turning every surface gold and making the shadows between people look deliberate. Kang Min and Naya arrived in separate cars, 12 minutes apart. Her entrance first, his second. The room tracked both. Naya took a glass of water from a passing tray and positioned herself near the east wall where she could see the full room. She had changed into a black dress with a structured neckline and her hair down for the first time in 4 days, and she stood with the particular stillness of someone who had not yet decided to relax. Around her, the room conducted its business in murmurs, alliances recalibrating. The afternoon's vote already metabolized into new calculations about where the syndicate's center of gravity now sat. She was on her second glass of water when the room's murmur dropped in register. Kang Min had taken the microphone from the evening's host, not forcefully, just cleanly, one hand extended, and the host had handed it over with the reflex of someone who understood that this was not a moment to negotiate. Kang Min stood at the center of the room in a dark suit, with his collar open at the top button, and said nothing for 2 full seconds while the room oriented itself toward him. Then he spoke. 11 words in Korean, delivered at conversational volume, without performance. 나의 아나이가 이제국 케울 나보다 deo 잘 지배하고 있다. 게우게오시 하egsim. My wife has more control over this empire than I do. That's the point. He handed the microphone back, dropped to one knee fast, no ceremony, the way a person moves when the decision is already made and the body is just executing it. He looked across the room at Naya. The room did not applaud. It went very still in the way that rooms go still when something is happening that everyone understands they will be referencing for years. Naya held his gaze. The amber light caught the edge of his jaw, the line of his shoulders, the steadiness in his eyes. She set her water glass down on the tray of a passing server without looking away from him. Then she walked toward him, not fast. Her heels were quiet on the floor and her face was composed, and she crossed the full length of the room with every set of eyes in it on her back. When she reached him, she extended her right hand, palm down. He took it, stood. The gala resumed around them, conversation restarting, the room exhaling and returning to its business. But the geometry of the evening had permanently reorganized. Every person present had registered, in the precise ledger that powerful people keep, exactly where the authority in this marriage resided, and always had. Late. The penthouse. The whiteboard was still standing in the interior study, covered in their overlapping handwriting, her financial architecture on the left, his security grid on the right, the 2 systems braided together in the center where neither of them had planned it. Naya stood in front of it for a moment in the quiet of the apartment, still in the black dress, heels off. She went to the hallway console. The 2 champagne glasses were still there, exactly where she'd set them 4 nights ago, before she'd heard Kang Min's voice through the cracked study door and put them down without a sound. The bubbles were long gone. The glasses were room temperature. She carried them to the kitchen, poured them out, rinsed them, and opened the refrigerator for a fresh bottle. When she turned around, Kang Min was in the kitchen doorway, jacket off, watching her. She poured 2 glasses, handed one to him. He looked at the glass, looked at her. His thumb moved once across the stem. You planned all of this. I planned the part where we survived, Naya said. The rest was you. He held her gaze for a moment. The stillness in his face was not distance. It was the particular attention of someone listening to something being said underneath the words. Then he raised his glass. She raised hers. They drank. Outside the windows, Soul ran at full burn 40 stories below, indifferent, enormous, and entirely theirs. Naya didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't run. She opened a laptop, followed the money, and took everything. If this story hit different, share it with someone who needs to see a woman win like this. And if you want more stories where the most dangerous person in the room is always the one they underestimated, subscribe. We're just getting started.